Welcome, everyone. My guest today is Lead Analyst Logan Mohtashami to talk about home prices and whether he expects them to fall in 2026. We'll also talk about the potential new Fed chair. And at the end of this episode, we're going to talk about a close colleague of ours who we lost over the weekend and give our listeners a sense of who she was. Before we begin, I want to thank our sponsor, Trust and Will, for making this episode possible. Logan, welcome back to the podcast.
It is wonderful to be here, Sarah.
Wonderful to have you. Okay, so economics first. Let's talk about the big news over the last, say, 5 days in a lot of circles was some predictions that home prices were going to crash. Worse than 2008, I think, is the quote that I saw over a lot of places. So maybe bring us up to speed on what that is and how worried you are about home prices.
So since I could remember over the last 12 or 13 years, I've witnessed how the housing price crash people do this. Just remember, these are not housing analysts. They are entertainers. That's all they are. If you look at him as an entertainer, then these headlines start to make sense. But, doing this in the last decade from 2012 to 2019, the housing bubble 2.0 people, they always had every year there was something that was supposed to bring prices back down to the mean or reversion to the mean, and it never worked, right? Of course, going into COVID, everyone right away, home prices would crash. We wrote, even articles talking about what would it take for home prices to crash. Now, because of what's happened, in 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, we get the same people that keep on saying worse than the great financial crisis. Home prices are going to drop, to X, or they're going to revert back to the means of median, stuff like that. And I always stress to everyone, they are entertainers. They are not housing analysts. A housing analyst wouldn't do this every single day for 4 straight years. Now, what I've done is tactically trick them into letting me debate them, so then everyone gets to see. You only listen to people that have a forecast and a model. A model is much more important than the forecast because it keeps you in line to what your economic work is. None of these people are serious people, right? You just go back and ask them for their forecast and their models, make them visually show you. And then the 50% crash, which the person even said, I never really said that, it was 38%, whatever it is, this individual has been wrong for 4 straight years. So wrong that it amounts to the same levels of the housing price crash. So always remember, do not listen to any headline. Look at the person's work. And I guarantee you 100%, all these price crash doomers are all anti-central bank people. It's a business model. So what we're going to do today is explain what would it look like for this major deflationary collapse in home prices, which is really rare in the history of America going back post-World War II. But what will it look like?
What will it look like? And the reason that we keep bringing this up is because this particular interview got a ton of play, right? So all the major news outlets covered it, or some of them. And the thing is that this is what buyers, sellers are looking at. And they're like, there's a home price crash coming worse than 2008. That's what they hear, right? And they hear it over and over again. And so that's one of the reasons we take it on specifically, is because we know that our listeners are sophisticated. They're not falling for that. But their buyers, their sellers, their the people that they do business with might very much think this. So let's dig in. What are you looking for, and why would you not be worried about this?
So post-World War II, it's really rare for nominal home prices to fall. If you take 2007 and 11 out of the equation, 1990 had 0.7% decline. 1991 had 0.2% decline. So these people are talking about big nominal home price crash. So what did we see in the one time in history that this did occur? Number one, the housing market the housing bubble was a massive credit sales boom. Credit leverage was being sent off the roof. If you look at the leverage ratios versus GDP or household worth, they were off the charts. None of that's happening right now, right? We did a major deleveraging through foreclosures and short sales. And because of qualified mortgage and the bankruptcy reform laws, you can't basically leverage up in housing like people did in the past. So we don't have any credit leverage cycle. going back in the last 14 years, what we saw from 2002 to 2005. Then we want to go back to the inventory story. Can you hypothetically have a 50% or 38% or 20% or so, whatever these people have forecasted for 13 years? We recorded them all too. Active inventory in America in 2007 was 4 million. Active inventory today in America is 1.52. Okay, difference.
Big difference.
Big difference. The new listings data, which we always think is key, which I don't think these people even have, right? I think they're to me what we call third-party regurgitators. They take other people's data and then they massage it to create a narrative for themselves. Our new listings data, and I showed this over the weekend on Twitter, last week was like 47,000, the seasonal decline. The normal periods in the last decade from 2013 to 2019, the seasonal peaks would be about 80 to 100,000. In the last 5 years, the years that were supposed to have this massive price crash, 30 to 90,000, right there, something is different, right? But again, reading, anybody that can read would know this, right? Because you could see the difference. But back then, during the housing crash, these were forced credit sellers, right? Foreclosure, short sales. These homes were coming to the market, not because these were sellers that were going to be buyers. That number was running at 250 to 400,000 per week for years. So we've heard this Airbnb crash, all these things. It is the end of 2025. None of it ever happened, right? And these people have been saying this for year after year after year, including the individual that everybody's like gone back and looked at what they said. So the new listings data the last 5 years have been the lowest levels ever in history. We didn't even get back to a normal level this year that I was hoping that we would get. So even if I took the peak new listings data in the last 5 years, doubled it, wouldn't even get to the low end of the levels that we saw during the crash. Why? There are no forced sellers, right? We've had tons and tons, and this is very key for everyone. We've had so many recessions post-World War II. We only had one foreclosure crisis that led to the housing bubble crash. And now we adjusted all these rules after 2010 to facilitate the greatest home buying profile in the history of the world. And this is the one place they want to die on their sword. I mean, just it's not logical. But if you look at it as entertainment, yes.
Yeah. So I think this is the key, is like inventory, right? And the correlation between inventory and home prices, like to get home prices to fall by 50% or 36% or whatever we're talking about here. It's like you would need something really big to happen, because that's not normal, as you've pointed out. Now, obviously, these are national numbers. There are different markets that are having a correction. Austin, you could say that about discrete markets. But if you're talking about national numbers, it's not normal to have that kind of drop in home prices. It just doesn't happen.
You would have to, again, this is why I always say, we've had individuals in the last 5 years talk about big housing bubble crashes with inventory near all-time lows and 3 to 4% mortgage rate. This is how cuckoo this group is. But if you, again, look at them as entertainers,
right?
If you just think of them as entertainers for attention, then it's like, okay, they're all crazy, but we all watch crazy people on TV, right? So that's nothing different. Again, this is why a model is very critical. Now, here, it's at the end of 2025, right? I always like to teach it this way. For the next 100 years, we are on record, because I wanted to test my model against the biggest home sale crash ever, and then a 3-year period where sales stay at record low levels. We just had it, 2023, 2024, and 2025, right? In 2006, 7, and 8, inventory went vertical, right? Foreclosures, the tombstone chart that you are going to put, on my grave many years from now, that was showing stress in 2005, 6, 7, and 8. And here we are, that data line is running pre-COVID still. So the model that they're using for these big nominal home price crashes in 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2025, because the individual and the individual's partner forecasted the number one and number two biggest home price crash in history in 2024 and 2025 combined, and it didn't work. Why? There are no working models. So now you guys see this new listings data, active inventory, distressed sales as a higher percentage of sales in America. That's what was going on, right? If the percentage of distressed sales are up here, right, then that brings the whole price thing down. When it's down here, it's really hard, right? So that's what history has shown us. Again, why we always stress reading. So very simple, just kind of look at it because we just had that. Right? We have a working model. So now that we're at the end of 2025, you go back, you take their name, their face, their forecasts, you accumulate them all up for 5 years, and I guarantee you, you add the price gains to it, they would be wrong just as much as the housing crash price declines, right? So again, entertainers, not analysts. If you look at them as entertainers, then it makes sense. But we have working models. We show them all the time at live events. We show them in our articles. We've written countless of articles on this, and it is December 2025. The Russians failed, the Chinese failed, the Iranians failed, the anti-central bank failed, right? America is still standing here. The economy is still intact, right? There's no massive credit breaks or deep recessions. That was their fantasy dream in 2008, and they can't let it go. And we're sitting here with all the data, with all the numbers to show people why, right? The why is more important than what they proclaim to be the future of this country.
So let's talk about data for a second, because our data is different than the NAR data. The HousingWire data looks at things that are only available. Like if you want to go out and buy a house right now, you can buy them. So if they're under contract, if they're pending, they're not on our list. They are on the NAR list, but neither of those, ours doesn't show that. The NAR data doesn't show this either, correct?
You know, when I do the NAR chart, going back to the early 1980s, I draw these black lines. We call them crayon economics because I can teach a 5 to 6 year old child housing economics and they'll get it. But I cannot teach these grown ass adults like the inventory data looks different. So I draw these crayon lines. It used to be very common in previous decades in the 80s and 90s, 2000, that rising inventory rise with sales. And these black lines would go up and then sales would rise, prices would rise, housing. These are how the economic cycles work. None of that is happening here, in the last few years. And in fact, since really 2014, I always use 2014. 2014 was the last year that the NAR's inventory actually kind of grew just a little bit, just like a couple 100,000. I think it was like 2.4 million. That was a peak. And, home sales fell that year, but during that whole time, 70 to 80% of home sellers are buyers. So there's 20 to 30% of inventories left. A mortgage buyer, a first-time home buyer that does not, usually gobbles that up. And this is why inventory has gone down lower and lower and lower for the last 10 years. And then we got to a very, very unhealthy spot where the active inventory was at all-time lows in 2020. We had no seasonal increase. And then because of that, we had too many people chasing too few homes, but the credit market was completely fine. These weren't the 228s or the 327s or the 80/20s or the stated incomes or the option arm. None of these things are here. So it is not shocking that in the history books, 2023, 2024, 2025, inventory still today is at the bottom end level of the range of pre-COVID going back 4 decades. If you have the ability to read, or even if you couldn't read and just have the ability to see, those crayon charts are there for a reason. And it is December 2025.
It is December. So hopefully we have put that to rest for people. No matter what you see between here and Christmas, the New Year, it's that's not something you need to worry about. Let's switch a little bit and talk about the unknown of the next Fed president, right? The next Fed chair. We thought that we were going to have even today. So we're recording this on Tuesday. There's all this talk about like, we're going to know it today. And it seemed really certain that it was going to be Kevin Hassett. Is that how you say his name? Kevin Hassett? Yes. So, and then right before we get on, it looks like it's been pushed back again.
Yeah. There was rumors that, Trump was going to announce something. They've really leaked out information that it's going to be probably Kevin Hassett, or is this a trial balloon to see how the markets react to a Kevin Hassett? This White House likes to do a lot of trial balloons, so this is now kept on pushing out. So the whole shadow Fed president thing that they were going to announce this early never really happened. We're getting toward the end of the year, and Powell's end is in May. But now I think they've got some choices. Trump says he's picked the person. It looks like it's going to be Kevin Hassett. We've talked about this before. That to me, the White House was fuming after the last Fed meeting that Powell did not give forward guidance to be dovish. And because of that, and all the other Fed presidents came to be very, very hawkish. It just to me, it seems Trump doesn't want anything to do with any Fed member. Now, Kevin Hassett is technically better than Kevin Warsh, because Kevin Warsh has said some things that everyone is like, what is he talking about? So, and he's always hated the Fed, and now he wants to rule the Fed. So it's like, you bash all the people, now you want to be their boss. Kevin Hassett is going to be a kind of a yes man. It is not the guy I want. I would be relieved 100% if Kevin Hassett says that, well, I'll leave the Fed chairman as soon as Trump leaves. Because what I feel like Kevin Hassett will do, let's say hypothetically, Trump leaves at the end, a Democrat wins, Kevin Hassett will go into reverse mode, and instead of being very dovish, will be super hawkish on everything to try to inflict pain. This is why I don't like ideological people in heads of power in institutions that are supposed to be away from everything. Christopher Waller was part of Team Logan, right? Labor over inflation. The 10-year yield today, at last I checked, was 4.09%. The bond market did a lot of the heavy lifting, as they should have. We can keep this going in a normal sense. You don't necessarily need a yes man. But I just feel that Trump just doesn't trust any Fed members. And, unilaterally, Kevin Hassett can't just cut rates by himself, right? All he could do is try to gather up as many votes as possible. But what he will do, that is not Jerome Powell, he will not give any kind of hawkish tone. As long as Trump is president, he will have more of a dovish signal out there. That's what he can do for Trump. But he's got to make sure that he's got enough votes and rile up people. That's where I think a Christopher Waller, the markets will trust. They will get, he has a better way of talking about things with other Fed members that are hawks, and they could push that forward. But now you put kind of chaos into the system. You have somebody that does not like the hawkish people on the Fed. And I can imagine that if Trump doesn't have the numbers, he's just going to go after other Fed presidents, voting Fed presidents and non-voting Fed presidents, to kind of make sure that, he gets his ways. Because as soon as he gets the numbers, they can do what they want, right? They could cut rates or do that. And again, 65 to 75% of this whole 10-year yield channel and mortgage rates and everything is Fed policy. But we talk about this year more, if the labor data did not get softer and spreads didn't get better, mortgage rates are near 7%, right? Not near 6%. So these are the things that we have to start figuring out what's it gonna look like in 2026. Because 2026, boy, there could be some drama there.
There really could. Well, keep an eye out, you guys, our listeners here, but also on HousingWire.com. We are following this very carefully, as you can imagine. Logan, now I want to do something a little bit different. So this is more personal for you and me. The rest of this podcast, we wanted to talk about somebody who is just really dear to us, who unfortunately we lost over the weekend. And she is a person that if somebody has been on the podcast as a guest, not just this podcast, but Powerhouse, Real Trending, all of the Housing Wire podcasts, they would know our producer, Elissa Branch. And she unfortunately was in a fatal car wreck over the weekend, she and her boyfriend. And this has just gutted us. She was such an important part of this particular team, obviously very important to Housing Wire and to her larger production team. But for you and I, a lot of people just see you and me and they think, oh, it's two people, but it's never two people. It was always three people. And that was Alyssa. And so we wanted to just give our listeners a little bit of we just wanted to kind of give her a tribute because we are really going to miss her going forward. So would love to hear from you. Again, she was very young. She was 25. So it's just a shocking thing to lose somebody at that age. And it's just been tough.
She had such a great future. I mean, for her age and able to do, I mean, an award winning podcast to deal with you and I together,
I
especially to
know.
deal with me. I mean, unbelievable poise, and in my lifetime, I haven't had coworkers and I don't work. I mean, outside of you, she's really been the only coworker that I deal with on a daily basis. So, it is literally losing a family member. So it was just so gut wrenching. But knowing her, she'd always say, "Hey, get the podcast up. Make sure you do it this week.
I
Keep
know.
things going because we want to keep, staying in the top 10 in America for the Business News podcast." So definitely, we will always keep her in our memory all the time.
I think that's the thing. Like we were even like, oh, how can we do this week? But I could hear her. And here's the thing: she was so young, but from my perspective, sometimes she was the adult in the room with you
Well,
and
with me, she was
I.
always the adult in the room. Yes.
She had poise, like you said. That's a great way to describe it because she started working at HousingWire when she was an intern, like 21. She was still in school. We hired her. We saw so much potential there, and she immediately made a mark. And part of that was she was not intimidated. She had the skills and she built her expertise, but she also had the confidence to really mix it up with some of the really big leaders in the space on those other podcasts and sometimes on my podcast, and just really help them. And but mostly, especially, she was just such a big factor in this podcast. And I was thinking, Logan, about the many times, I mean, just on a regular basis, a daily podcast is a slog for the producer, right? And you and I are always in different places. We always have these crazy circumstances that she would have to work around. And I was thinking about a couple of years ago, we were in New York City. I think we were there for servicing, the MBA servicing conference, and we were staying, all of our team was staying at a hotel close to that hotel with tiny rooms, and we're trying to do the podcast, and it's so loud in our rooms and the lighting is so bad that eventually the only place, so she's helping us as we're trying to find some place. In your room there's like a wardrobe. It's not even like a true closet, it's just a wardrobe that you get inside. And that's the only place you can do it. And she and I, all we can see of you is like your eyes. They're like glowing because you look like some vampire. And then I'm in a smaller hotel room. I don't even have a wardrobe. So I end up in the bathroom and I have to put pillows and the towels and some of my clothes just to dampen the sound. And this was our best option. And that's just to me the perfect picture of how she would just roll with anything. And she's like, I got it. I'll figure it out in post production. Just supported us and is just a huge partner, even though to our listeners, they don't know all the work that she was doing.
Yes, we will truly miss her, but we will always keep her in our memories every single day. And any success this podcast has going out in the future is attributed to her.
I love that. And that's why we are continuing. She was a huge part of how we won our award, of the fact that we're often in the top 10 of Business News podcasts. She was very proud of that, as she should be. And so, again, we will miss her. Logan, thank you so much.